Alright, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be starting the civil rights movement here in the United States. We're going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to talk about Rosa Parks, which you can see her sitting there. We're going to talk about a couple of different Supreme Court cases. We're going to talk about the Little Rock Nine, and then in your activity today, you'll be looking at Emmett Till. All right, so let's look at the background for the start of the civil rights movement. So you'll remember from last semester we talked about the Supreme Court case, Plessy v. Ferguson already. So in 1896, Plessy v. Ferguson, it's going to pass and it's going to make segregation legal to be used. Okay, now segregation for the most part was primarily in the South, and it would encompass lots of different areas like schools, hospitals, transportation, restaurants, cemeteries, and even beaches. Now you might remember from Plessy v. Ferguson that the Supreme Court decided you can have segregation as long as things are separate but also equal. Okay, and we know that those things didn't happen in terms of equality. Now, segregation is going to extend to most areas of the South. However, discrimination was not just in the South. In the North, African Americans would be denied housing in certain areas, like suburbs. They would also be denied access to high-paying jobs, or may be faced with higher poverty rates and lower literacy rates than their white counterparts. Okay, so the civil rights movement is going to advance slowly in the 40s. All right. However, we're going to see that the military is going to be desegregated. We're also going to see the first African American player in Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson. That's a picture of him right there. Okay. Now, it's kind of ironic to note that really the Supreme Court is going to start all of this, and the Supreme Court is going to be the one to start ending all of this. Okay, so in Brown v. Board in 1954, the Supreme Court decides that segregation in public schools is now going to be unconstitutional. Okay, so that ruling in Brown v. Board, it's only going to apply to segregation in public schools. However, it's going to start convincing African Americans to start challenging segregation in other areas of society. Okay, and so that brings us to Rosa Parks. All right, so 1955, Rosa Parks, she boards a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and she sits down in the front. Okay, that is okay as long as there are open seats for white people in the front. If there are no more open seats, she's going to have to move to the back of the bus. So that's what's going to happen on the next stop. The bus driver asks her to move to the back to give up her seat to a white customer. She refuses. Okay, now you have to understand that there were contradictory Montgomery laws on the books. Okay, so one law in Montgomery said that segregation must be enforced. Okay, but there was another one, and for the most part it was largely ignored. But there was another one that said that no person, whether it be white or black, no person could be could be asked to give up a seat, even if there were no other seats on the bus available. Okay, keep in mind that one's going to be largely ignored. So, after refusing, she's going to be arrested for breaking the law. Okay, now her non-violent act of protest is going to inspire a boycott of the bus system in Montgomery. All right, the Montgomery bus boycott is going to be put together and led by a young pastor at the time, Martin Luther King Jr. And you also have to understand with the bus system in Montgomery that 70% of its riders using the buses had been black. So if even most or some of the African American population of Montgomery boycotts the bus system, their bus system is going to tank. All right, and so eventually it's going to lead the Supreme Court to ruling that segregation on public transportation is now unconstitutional. Okay, all right, so let's divert back to education. Okay, because we've just seen here that civil rights leaders have learned that if they start challenging different areas of society individually, they can get the federal government involved and start desegregating things one at a time. Okay, so back to education. All right, when you look at the map of state laws regarding segregation in public schools, prior to Brown v. Board, you'll note that where it is required, we're in the South. Where it is forbidden, so where segregation is not allowed for the most part, is in the northern states. Okay. Now, for the most part, slavery in these northern states, illegal. Slavery in these states down here, widely used. So we're seeing the echoes of history impact later history. Okay. All right, so let's talk about how Eisenhower is going to respond to all this. All right, so remember, Brown v. Board, segregation in public schools, no longer allowed. So, Little Rock, Arkansas, and you can see it here on the map. Okay, Shelbyville is going to be about right there. But Little Rock, Arkansas, the entire school board is going to plan to slowly desegregate. Okay, so their first attempt at this desegregation is they're going to send in 9 young African American students to the high school and enroll them. All right, now, local and state officials typically resisted the decision to desegregate, and we're going to see that clashes with federal governments, or with the federal government, was very common. All right, we see it here. The governor of Arkansas, he's going to send in the National Guard to prevent students from entering. Okay, he opposed the decision of the school board. All right, now along with the National Guard, white mobs formed outside of the school, screaming at the students and saying things such as lynch her. Okay, now Eisenhower is sitting back and he's looking at what's going on in Arkansas, and the governor of Arkansas is openly defying federal laws. Okay, and so this showdown is going to demonstrate that President Eisenhower would not tolerate that. All right, so in response, Eisenhower is going to send in federal troops to escort those students to school. Okay, and then the last thing with Eisenhower's presidency is the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Basically, it's just intended to protect right to vote. Okay, and it was the first civil rights bill to be passed by Congress since Reconstruction. And Eisenhower himself firmly believed in the right to vote, and he viewed it as like his responsibility to protect writing votes for people. Okay, all right. So here are some pictures of Little Rock 9, that event. Here we're looking at federal troops escorting those students to school. And then here you can see a photo of the white mobs that those students might have faced. Okay, and take note of some of the expressions on the people's faces, like this lady screaming, the look of disdain here and here. Okay. Alright guys, that is it for our notes today. We went through them super quick here in the video. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment below, or as always, you can ask me in class.